Hey, what is up, mortals? It is Robo Celestial here with a new video for you. Welcome to What If Deku Could Use Haki. I just wanted to greet you guys by just saying, sit back and relax, you're in for a treat. Class 1 continued raging on with their training, filling the forest with nothing but screams of pain and frustration. Everyone was giving it their all, pushing their quirks to their absolute limits. Most of them weren't used to this kind of training, but they had a mutual thought of encouragement. It was that a quirkless kid defeated the #1 hero in a fist fight. So they have no reason to be slacking off. Everyone was doing what they were told to do, except for one, in the distance. Not far from the other students, one could hear loud blasts followed by the occasional scream or bellow. It was Izuku, and he was breaking himself. The green-haired boy did as Aizawa had instructed and tried to master his new move. But it was both painful and difficult. He figured out how to willingly make his fist go up in flames. And it was by winding up to the point that he almost turned his back towards his target. The stance made it look like he was trying to throw a discus. Except he's throwing his fist. Izuku wound up properly, until he shouted, "Red Hawk," before throwing his burning fist into the mountainside. The mountain rumbled as another crater was formed on its side. Izuku was grunting in pain. For every time he used this attack he would end up burning himself. The green-haired boy started to respect people like Katsuki and Todoroki, because they use fire-based attacks like it's nothing. Izuku felt the pain course through him, but he didn't let it stop him. He clenched his fist tightly as he shouted again, before proceeding to repeat what he had just done. Not far away from the scene was none other than Aizawa. Observing his green-haired student, he was impressed by the fact that Izuku had managed to get the hang of his new move already. But he was looking for something else. He wondered what Izuku's power actually was, and how it worked. Erasure has no effect on him, so it's not a quirk. At the same time, however, it couldn't be anything other than a quirk. A normal kid can't tank and knock out All Might, and they shouldn't be able to light their hands on fire. The tired teacher kept observing Izuku at a distance, but never found an answer to his question. The day went on, and more pain followed. After the hellish training, everyone was told that they had to cook their own food if they wanted to eat, which no one was particularly happy about. Izuku was being careful, trying to maneuver his burnt hands without hurting himself. He ended up taking things incredibly slowly, and that is when he realized something around him. He noticed that Koto was nowhere to be seen, even though he could clearly see Mandalay. The green-haired boy almost got worried as he used his observation to see where Koto was at. Izuku's worry quickly vanished, however, when he found Koto's presence near a cliff in the forest. At first Izuku thought that he would go and check on him, but he then decided against it. He figured that Koto probably had a reason for wanting to be alone, so he decided to leave him be. "Midoriya," a cold voice called out, knocking Izuku back to reality. The green-haired boy turned to face the voice, and noticed that it was Todoroki. "I could hear your screams of pain from across the forest. How's your training going?" the bi-colored boy then asked, sounding as cold as he usually did. Izuku just sighed as he raised and pointed towards one of his hands while saying, "It's painful. I honestly don't get how you do it. Brain freeze." With a somewhat calm voice, Todoroki just giggled upon hearing this, as he responded by saying, "You'll get used to it, gradually." Izuku just giggled upon hearing this, as he scratched the back of his neck. The two didn't get to chat for much longer, however, until Aizawa told them to stop slacking around. The two teens quickly got back to work, not wanting their teacher to get any more annoyed with them. The day after came, and the students didn't even get a second to rest. It was back to hellish training immediately, and the forest would be filled with more painful shrieks from Izuku. Later that same day it was announced that they would have a test of courage, but most didn't know how to feel about it at this point. Nightfall eventually came, and the students made different teams for the test of courage. Tiger was explaining the exercise to everyone, but Izuku was barely listening to anything. He was too tired and in too much pain to even bother with listening. The green-haired boy kept standing in the same place, even after the exercise started, until he was knocked out of his trance. It wasn't that someone nudged him or spoke to him, it was that he sensed something odd. He could smell something, but he couldn't put a pin on what it was. "Is everything all right, Midoriya?" Ada then asked, almost sounding a little concerned. Izuku turned towards his blue-haired friend, wearing a confused expression, as he answered, "I'm fine, but I thought I smelled something." While still sniffing the air, Ada got curious upon hearing this, and began sniffing the air too. "Now that you mention it, there is a weird scent in the air." "Is that smoke?" Ada then exclaimed, almost panicking when he realized what it was. Izuku's eyes went wide when he heard what Ada said, for he quickly realized that he was right. The green-haired boy then felt something odd with his observation, and he could tell that it wasn't good. It was familiar, but he couldn't put his finger on it. Something's wrong, Izuku muttered, trying to figure out where he had sensed this before. Ada looked at him confused as he asked, "What do you mean?" Wanting to hear more of what he was thinking, Izuku didn't even look at the blue-haired boy. As he answered, "I have a bad feeling. It's almost like the green-haired boy said," but quickly cut himself off. He now remembered where he had sensed this before, and it didn't help to calm him down. The last time he sensed something like this was in the USJ. Right before the villains swarmed in, Izuku began to panic as he ran through the other students until he reached Mandalay. "Mandalay, call the others back. We've been compromised," Izuku shouted with haste. Everyone, including the heroes, looked at Izuku in confusion until they smelled something. They didn't have time to identify the smell until they clearly saw the forest light up with blue flames. The heroes quickly acted, but that is when Pixie Bob was dragged away by some invisible force. Izuku's eyes followed, only to see someone holding a huge pole-like object to Pixie Bob's head. Izuku got more frustrated as more and more villains showed themselves from behind the trees. "Everyone, get back to camp immediately," Mandalay called out with her quirk, as both she and Tiger tried to hold the villains off. Izuku gathered up with Ada and more of his classmates, until he stopped and realized something. One person wasn't with them right now, and it was Koda. The villains being there meant that no one was safe in the forest, and Izuku was probably the only one that knew where the boy was at. Izuku didn't think about it any longer. He just took off. He ignored the cries and calls from their others as he ran straight towards Koda's location. Koda was panicking. Not only could he see the forest on fire, but he quickly realized that he wasn't alone at the cliffside. From the darkness came a man clad in a dark coat, wearing some weird mask. Koda began to panic even more as the man walked closer while winding up for a punch, but he was saved when something pulled him out of the way. The man's fist collided with the ground as his mask fell off his face. "Koda, are you all right?" the savior called, and Koda turned to see who it was. It was none other than Izuku, and Koda was surprised to see him. "How did you find me?" Koda asked, sounding shell-shocked. Izuku just smiled at him as he answered, "I saw you come here once, so I just assumed that you'd be here." With a calm voice, Koda calmed down and almost smiled upon hearing this. His calm was cut short, however, when the man started to speak. "Are you Midoriya? The boss said that we could kill you. Do you perhaps know where a kid named Bakugo is?" the man said, sounding menacing as he did. Izuku slowly turned towards the man. Slightly irritated, he could sense that this man was pure evil, but wasn't the only thing bothering him. It was the fact that he was after Katsuki, one of his friends, that irritated him. It's you. You killed my parents," Koda shouted with tears in his eyes. Izuku was shocked to hear this. As he more carefully inspected the man now, he recognized him from a news report about a villain. It was at that moment that Izuku realized that this man had killed heroes, and he knew who he was. The little irritation within Izuku quickly turned into burning hot rage as he looked at the blonde man and said, "I see, you must be Muscular." With a cold voice, Muscular was surprised as he grinned and said, "So you recognize me," but was cut off by a very angry Izuku. "Zip it. I don't intend on conversing with the likes of you. So I'm just gonna tell you 3 things. 1. You made a mistake coming here. 2. If you want to hurt any of my friends, you'll have to go through me first. 3rd, I won't let you get away with what you did to Water Hose," the green-haired boy said, almost sounding as menacing as a villain. Muscular was caught off guard by this behavior, but he quickly smiled while saying, "All right, show me yo," but was cut off once again by Izuku, who charged and punched him in the jaw. The green-haired boy then continued by delivering Haki-infused punch after punch, all to Muscular's weak points. The villain tried to fight back at one point, but was hit in the family jewels by Izuku's Haki-infused foot. Muscular could barely move as the green-haired boy then delivered a kick to his head. The villain was thrown into the mountainside, making a loud crash as he landed. "I thought I told you. I don't intend on conversing with the likes of you," Izuku then said, before turning his back and walking towards Koda. The boy was shocked because he could barely understand what had happened. Izuku had charged in while Muscular was talking and had caught him off guard. It was a cheap trick, but it worked like a charm. It only went to show one thing: Izuku doesn't let an opportunity slip out of his grasp. "Are you okay?" the green-haired boy asked, Still wearing his calm expression, Koda looked at him in awe. For he truly looked like a superhuman, until he smiled and said, "Yes." Izuku smiled back at Koda and was about to speak, until he was cut off by the sound of rocks crashing. The green-haired boy turned to face the source of this sound, only to see that Muscular was still conscious. Izuku frowned upon witnessing this, as he muttered, "This guy doesn't know when to quit." With a hint of anger behind his words, Muscular staggered back to his feet, until he turned towards Izuku with a wide grin. "That was impressive, but it'll take more than that to knock me down," the blonde villain said, as he reached for something in his pocket. Izuku didn't need observation haki to know this wasn't good, so he readied himself. Muscular took some weird item out of his pocket before placing it over one of his eyes. The villain's body suddenly changed, transforming like it was being consumed by its own quirk. Izuku was still recovering from his training. That is why he attacked and tried to knock Muscular mid-sentence. He knows that he can't take the villain's head on, so he wouldn't do that, but there was a catch this time. Koda was still behind Izuku, and the boy could possibly take the damage that was meant for Izuku. The green-haired boy steadied himself, coating his arms with haki. As he prepared to take Muscular head-on, the villain charged at Izuku, bellowing as he did. The green-haired boy tried to push the villain back, but it was too hard. This was unlike anything he had ever faced before. This brute strength. Izuku was forced to the ground, while Muscular kept shouting and putting more pressure on him. Koda was horrified by what he was seeing. This man, this stranger, was being beaten up and almost killed just to save him. He watched as Izuku gave in more and more, until it looked like he was about to drop dead. Tears welled up in Koda's eyes, and he didn't want to see this anymore. Stop, he muttered weakly. But it didn't change anything. Stop, he muttered again, only to get the same result. Koda didn't know what to do anymore. He felt so powerless, and all of his emotions started to well up inside him. Then he screamed, "Stop," letting everything out. Like a raging wave, the world grew silent and almost stopped. This wave was powerful, and it shook the spirits of everyone present. Muscular was almost petrified by this power. As he loosened up some of the pressure he held over Izuku, the green-haired boy was stunned by this turn of events. This was a power that he was all too familiar with, one that both he and Rayleigh could utilize. Izuku almost didn't want to believe that Koda was one of those people, that he could use Conqueror's haki. The wave then disappeared, almost as quickly as it had appeared, and that is when Izuku made his move. He broke loose from the still petrified Muscular, uppercutting him in the jaw as he did so. He then grabbed the villain by the hair with one hand, while winding up with the other. The green-haired boy then swung his blazing fist with fury, as he bellowed, "Red Hawk!" right as his fist collided with Muscular's face, making a fiery blast. The villain was once again sent into the mountainside, this time losing consciousness. Izuku panted heavily as his fist trembled from the pain, but he endured it. He then turned towards a shocked Koda, as he smiled and said, "Thank you, you saved my life there," showing just how grateful he was. Koda now looked confused, for he didn't know what Izuku was talking about. "What do you mean? I didn't do anything," the boy said, making his confusion known. Izuku just giggled upon hearing this, as he said, "No, Koda, you did everything. You just used an ancient and forgotten power that only a select few can bring out the full potential. It's called Haki." With a calm voice, Koda was both shocked and confused upon hearing this, as he muttered, Kai," still sounding confused. Izuku kept smiling, as he answered, "Yes, Koda, Haki, those of the select few are often individuals that are destined for greatness, and I believe that you are one of those people." With a calm voice, Koda was once again shocked, but he was also happy. He didn't understand what Haki was, but he was happy to hear that the man who saved him also believed in him. "I'll tell you more about it later, but you have to keep it a secret. For now, let's get you somewhere safe," Izuku then said. Koda didn't object to this. He only nodded. The green-haired boy then picked Koda up, before leaping off into the forest. Izuku and Koda leaped through the forest, hoping to get back to camp without any trouble. Luckily for them, they managed to stumble across none other than Aizawa. The tired teacher looked skeptical when looking at Izuku, for he could tell that the green-haired boy had been in a battle. "Mr. Aizawa, I need you to take Koda and get back to camp. I don't know why, but those villains are after Kaken for some reason," Izuku quickly informed, as he placed Koda back on the ground. He was about to run off into the forest, but was stopped when Aizawa called out, "Midoriya." Izuku stopped and turned towards his teacher, who seemed to be conflicted. He knew that Izuku was going to look for his classmates, and he would go regardless of what he was told. The tired teacher then clenched his fist, as he decided Izuku was easily as strong as All Might. And right now they needed that strength. Tell Mandalay that everyone has my permission to use their quirks, in case they need to defend themselves. Also, Aizawa said, until he stopped. Izuku looked his teacher in the eyes as he listened to his words. I'm counting on you. Make sure that everyone comes back in one piece, Aizawa said. Izuku was shocked upon hearing this. These words weren't some order that he needed to follow. It was a request. Aizawa was genuinely pleading for Izuku to help him. And everyone else. The green-haired boy clenched his fist as he nodded in confirmation. He then turned away and, with haste, ran through the forest. Aizawa was relieved, for now he knew that things would be okay. He believed in Izuku, and he believed in his abilities. He knew that this kid was already a hero, and he believed in him enough to ask him for help. The tired teacher then sighed, knowing that his students were now safe.